So if you want to know how to mash up loops and breaks on a Volca sample like this, then keep watching. This is going to be quite an advanced tutorial. There's plenty of other videos on YouTube showing how to use the basics of the Volca sample. This is more about squeezing out some functionality that the sample was never designed for, i.e. working with loops. What we're going to be doing is importing loops into the Volca sample, prepared in a special way. This is because we want to be able to use the sample start point spread across lots of different values to chop up a loop into lots of little parts. The only problem with this is the sample start point at 127, which is maximum, isn't 100% way through the sample. It's only 90%. So the first thing we've got to do is prepare our samples by adding a slice onto the end of them to make them the right length. So I'll switch over to the computer and show you how to do that. So over the computer here we've got Audacity as our audio editor. I've got a folder full of drum loops here, so I've picked one already that I like the sound of. I'll drop that into Audacity and we can hear it play. You need to check as well that it actually loops properly at this point. In Audacity you can shift and play to do that. So that works nicely. If we then drop our cursor down here at the end, we need to be looking at this value. We need to make sure so that samples is selected. I think it's, by standard it's probably that one. So click here, get samples, and make a note of this number. We need to add on, well, we need to make this value, this length of sample 90%. To do that, we take this number, put it in a calculator from 1 to 1,656, times it by 0.1111 or thereabouts. It's 0.1 reoccurring, 4 decimal places is enough. Which gives us a value of 13515. So drop our cursor back in here at the end, and then we go generate silence. We need to select samples in here as well. And type in that value, 13515. It'll add a chunk of silence on the end. And that's all we need to do. You can also create this space and then add another sample in. If you really want to get tricky with programming, you can use that sound then in a composition. So effectively you can have more than one sound in a sample as it's loaded in. But for simplicity's sake, I'm going to show it as a silence here. So then we just export that down. You may have noticed by this point that these loops are 2 bars long. Don't worry about that. The calculation works exactly the same for loops of a single bar in length as well. So I've already done a bunch of these here and saved them into their own folder. This is the one we just processed, and I've got a whole bunch of other breaks that I like the sound of out of the same folder. I've also got this piece of software loaded up which is free, which I'm going to call Vosyr. V-O-S-Y-R. Not quite sure how you pronounce that. But this is a sample uploading tool for the Volca that's free. You can also upload sequences, although I've never actually messed with this. I just have, great success in getting samples onto the Volca using it. It just seems to work. So this is my go-to for moving samples onto it. First thing I need to do to make some space on the Volca sample is to erase all samples. So you've got the option here to transfer the original factory samples back on again, so don't worry too much about doing this. Click on clear all samples, and we need to connect it up as shown here with the audio output going into the in on the Volca. So here I have the audio output of my audio interface going to the in of my Volca sample. We also need to make sure any monitoring is muted because it will make a loud sound as it's doing this. So as soon as we hit let's go, data will appear and that little bar will go across the bottom. After that we need to press function. So now we've emptied the device, we can add some samples onto it. Memory is shown here. 0k at the moment, up to 4 meg maximum. So we just drag them in like that. So that's just one. If we want to do all these, we can drag these in a big lump. If I can see what I was doing, that would help. There we want to be from 87 onwards. So once we've got all those in the right slots, we can click Transfer Filled Samples. This will generate some data. This will take a little while. And it will show us the sample numbers it's going to transfer over, and as soon as we hit Let's Go, it will once again say Data on the front of the screen, and S, and then the number of samples, and you'll get a progress bar. This will take a little while. And once again, once that's done, all we need to do is press Function, and it's complete. So now that we've got all our samples loaded in, if we just quickly select a memory that we're not using, so hold memory, press say 10, and then Function, and all will clear everything. We can now select, we'll be able to see that only the samples we've loaded in will be selectable, because we've deleted everything else. So here's the first one we did, which will just play as normal. If we go into step mode, select everything. I'm just going to get that. That's just to stop it from continually playing. Then what we need to do is to create a table of values that we're going to automate the start point with, one for each step. So we've got a knob here that has a range of 0 all the way up to 127. So that's 128 values. We need to divide that by the number of steps, which is 16. So if we take 128 divided by 16, that's 8 increments per step. But our first step wants to be 0, because that's the start. So 0. And the one after that, number 2, actually needs to be 7, because the knob goes from 0 to 127, not 1 to 128. So the next one's 7, and then after that, we'll just add 8 on until we get to 16 values. So that's our 16 values that we need to enter into each step. This process will also work with other time signatures, but you'll have to take into consideration the number of steps that you're going to be using. So for example, if you had a 3/4 rhythm, you might put it into 12 steps. So at the beginning you'd divide 128 into 12 and use that value as a starting point. So now what we need to go through is map each step onto each value. So if we do this as the Volca sample is playing, we'll be able to hear the effect each of the new sample start points is having as we enter them in. The first thing we need to do is make sure that motion sequence is switched on. So if it's not, make sure this is lit up. And then we can hold a step and turn it to match the value. I've divided the table up here a little, so we've got 4 sections, which makes it a little bit easier to follow. So if we hit play, the next one will be 7. There we go, so that's perfect. So it's a really good idea at this point to save. Right, so that's all the hard work done, so now the fun bit. So as we've set out our sequence here to re-trigger each 16th step in a new position, we can select new drum breaks using the sample selection knob in real time, like this. So that's already one element of performance, but also if we jump into step jump mode, this is also an option, so you can manually slice up breaks as we go along. Not only can we do that, we can also select new samples as we're slicing them up in step jump mode. So that gives us a great potential for real-time break slicing, and also we can alter our tempo. Without altering pitch. For a bit of time stretching. And we can alter our pitch without altering our tempo. Which, by the way, also works for pitched loops. If you were to put a bass line in, for example, you could use the same method and then use function and speed to alter by a number of semitones. Also, we can alter the sample length and decay, coupled with a bit of reverb. You can get some really interesting effects. So there you go, there's absolutely tons of stuff you can do. You can sync this up to another Volca and play it in real time, or sequence new values into the step sequencer to create new slice points. So this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. So yeah, please leave any comments below and ask any questions. If I didn't quite cover anything properly, let me know, and thanks very much for watching. So because we've managed to slice each of the samples into 16ths, as we go through and play and tweak the sample selection knob, it's going to select another break. At whatever point that is in that break will continue to play on a different sample, which means that we can... yeah. How on earth do I describe this?